What's going on, YouTube? It's your boy Cyclops. Happy Valentine's Day, happy Throwdown Tuesday, happy Top Variant Tuesday, happy Team Up Tuesday. We're going to be talking about all those things here today. If you follow me on Instagram, you saw my post today. I posted a Team Up Tuesday, and I promised you guys I'd be doing a little video on one of my favorite series, which is Uncanny X-Force. This is the series that came out around, I want to say like 2010, 2011. Rick Remender and Esad Ribic, he did the covers. Just a beautiful, beautiful book. I love the covers personally. I thought they were just like so different. So kind of, it had that classic look. I know Esad, he is like a Frank Frazetta, kind of like a throwback to that artist, like gets a lot of stuff from him, but like he switched it up with kind of like, I want to say like the cyberpunk type colors and imagery. So it kind of looks like half like fantasy fiction novel, half, manga, to a certain extent. And this is just a book that really kicked a lot of butt, to be honest. I remember when it came out, DC Comics was just crushing the game. I mean, you had the Green Lantern, Blackest Night was going on. You had Batman R.I.P. going on. Grant Morrison was writing that. He was writing Final Crisis. And every like DC book that was coming out, I was into. Greg Rucka was writing Batwoman, with Jonathan H. Williams. Dustin Nguyen was doing all kinds of crazy watercolor covers. And they were just doing great. And then I just remember on online boards, different channels, the different comic book shops that I went to, everybody was talking about, man, you got to check out this Uncanny X-Force series. It's just dope. You got to check it out. So it's a series that I love and kind of inspired me to go into just all the different iterations of X-Force. So let's get into it, right? So X-Force actually started way back. I want to say it was either late 80s, early 90s with a writer and artist named Rob Liefeld. Rob Liefeld is kind of a legend in the game. He does Whatnot videos to this day. He has actually a podcast where he breaks down like the history. He goes into the whole history of the comic book industry. He's very knowledgeable, and he has a very unique, captivating, and actually kind of polarizing art style, right? A lot, like, you have people who hate on Rob Liefeld, you have people who love Rob Liefeld. But the thing about it is, with his X-Force book, and he also did a book called New Mutants, which at the time, late 80s, early 90s, you got to remember, like, X-Men was just like the hottest thing, like in pop culture, in the comic book community. So he was making these new characters. Like, he created the new character called Cable. He created Deadpool, a slew of others, and then he did a bunch of other things. But I want to stay on the topic of X-Force. So what I got right here, this is actually the original X-Force series. This is X-Force number 7, and this is a Rob Liefeld cover. I mean, look at that. It's just like super just graphic and intense. I mean, you got this big, huge, like 80s action movie star who I feel like Cable was inspired by, right? I mean, he kind of has a little bit of an Arnold Schwarzenegger look, especially with like the cybernetic arm and whatnot, and just all the guns and all the gear and everything. I love his flashing eye. Put that a little bit closer, see his eye flashing. Look at all those guns he's got, all the ammo, and then you got, I think that's Boomer and Cannonball. At the bottom looks like Cannonball took a hit. But this is what the late 80s, early 90s was all about, like these graphic, crazy looking covers. And that's what first captivated audiences, with this style. And this is kind of like the beginnings of X-Force right here. So Rob Liefeld is a great guy. Like I said, his podcast is Whatnot. I live in his area, so I'm hoping one day I can run into him. And maybe get like a picture at least. I'm not going to ask him for an autograph, but maybe a picture with him would be really cool. Like I said, I'm in his area. So anyway, this is the original X-Force right here. That's the art style from I think this would be early 90s, if I'm not mistaken. As time went on, X-Force continued. So there's like, I don't know how many hundreds of issues of the original X-Force that came out. But in the early 2000s, it was relaunched. I don't know if it was the first relaunch, but I remember when these came out. This is the early 2000s X-Force relaunch with covers and art by a guy by the name of Clayton Crane, who again, let me zoom in on that a little bit, is another like super unique, super graphic artist. I mean, the way this guy draws like explosions and fire and blood and action is just really unique. He actually doesn't, drawing isn't really the right word. He's more of like I want to say like he uses like different types of paint techniques and some like digital paint as well. But when this came out, I remember I was in the comic book store thinking like, wow, that is like some intense looking stuff. At the time, I wasn't really into X-Force or X-Men, but I just thought it looked amazing. And this right here is like one of my favorite covers from that series. And this is a series I would love to get all of the covers of. I have a few of them. There's a ton of variants, and then they did this series called X-Force Necrosha X, where like they basically fight zombies, like zombie versions of the Marvel Universe. And so it's cool stuff, man. It's very, very action packed. If you're like me, if you just like a good action story, a lot of fighting, a lot of, violence, right? This is kind of the series for you. And Clayton Crane is another big time artist, so X-Force kind of has a history of, really big kind of groundbreaking art just throughout, the different instances and the different, what's the word I'm looking for? Like the different relaunches and whatnot. One thing I want to say about this version of X-Force is I thought it was really cool because this story is basically Cyclops, one of my favorite characters, if you haven't already guessed from my name. He actually puts this team together to do kind of like Black Ops mission type stuff where they go out and like straight up assassinate people. And I thought it was kind of an interesting character turn at the time. Like Cyclops kind of has this sort of, from the old days, this goody two-shoes, Boy Scout type characterization. So when I heard it's like, oh, Cyclops puts this team together and tells them like, look, I need you guys to go take some fools out. I thought like, man, that's pretty gangster right there for Cyclops to do that. So I thought that was cool. The one thing that kind of threw me off about this was X-23. X-23 is actually Wolverine's daughter, and that's her right there on the bottom. And what threw me off was like, if they're gonna make this hit squad, why would they put a kid on this hit squad, right? And that kind of threw me off when I first like saw the covers and some friends told me about the series. And then as time went on, I actually read the series and I come to find that's actually like a subplot of the series is Wolverine kind of isn't cool with Cyclops putting his daughter on the team. So it's kind of a cool dynamic, and X-23 actually becomes one of my favorite characters over the years. I'm not gonna go too much into that, but this is kind of like the early days of X-23, also known as Laura, also known as like the all new Wolverine. She basically takes up the mantle of Wolverine. These are kind of like the early days of her being part of the X-Men mythos and X-Men universe. So I am going to make a video on X-23 because she is one of my favorite characters. Which also, we got to mention Cable is actually one of my favorite characters as well. So next up, let's go back an issue here. So this version of Uncanny X-Force comes later. So after Cyclops puts the hit squad together, he actually dismantles them. And after he dismantles them, Archangel Warren Worthington III, he decides to kind of reassemble the X-Force team that Cyclops put together, then break up, he reassembles them and adds a few characters. So Archangel adds characters like Deadpool, he adds Phantom X, and this is just a really dope team. It's Archangel, Phantom X, Deadpool, Wolverine, and Psylocke. And then eventually they add a few other characters. I don't know if you guys are familiar. There's a character named Deathlock, who's like this kind of, he was this really kind of obscure character from way back when, and he gets added to this version of X-Force. And this is just a super fun book. It is action-packed, but I feel like Phantom X and Deadpool and Deathlock all bring in this sort of level of comedy. So it's actually like one of the first books I got into that had Deadpool in it, and it actually made me really like Deadpool and appreciate his comedy. When like the Deadpool movies came out and like the old school, like the early 2000s Deadpool series, I wasn't really into it because I thought it was like too comedy and I didn't like all the breaking of the fourth wall and all that. But this series here like really balances out where it gives you like that classic Deadpool, but then it's super action packed and has these really dramatic moments as well. So if you're gonna read any of the series I'm talking about right now, any of the different X-Forces, read this one, the Rick Remender with the Esad Ribic covers. This is the one I personally really enjoy. Real quick before I go into, I got some other comics I want to talk about. I want to talk about the Marvel Legends line, and these are the action figures that Hasbro has put out that are just really good quality. And this is the deluxe. How tall is this thing? This is like a, I don't know how tall it is, but this is the deluxe Deadpool. This is the Toys R Us exclusive. My homeboy, if you guys are on Whatnot, I'm really good friends with Impure. Impure and we actually went to a comic book shop here locally, and we picked this up for a steal. The store actually had two of these, and Impure bought both of them, and he gave me one of them. Shout out to Impure if you're watching this. This is just a dope action figure. It's got all his weapons, different hands, swords, guns. This is the Toys R Us exclusive. Just awesome figure, and this is the gray costume. It's got a cool rainbow sort of foil effect on the back. But this is the Uncanny X-Force version of Deadpool with the gray costume. So this is one of my prized possessions that I hopefully will never sell. I am open to offers, but this is one I'm probably gonna keep because this is pretty hard to find. And like I said, it was a gift from Impure. So this one's not for sale. You can shoot me offers if you want, but I'm probably keeping this. One of my favorite action figures. If you don't know, Marvel Legends is an action figure line where they have like almost every single Marvel character by now. All the different X-Men characters are in that line. I believe every character and every costume variant from this series, I think almost all of them are in action figure form on the Marvel Legends line. So shout out to Impure. All right, so let's talk about after this series ended, what Marvel did, which I think to this day is kind of weird, is they split the teams up in two, and they actually had two different X-Force comic books running at the same time. And those are going to be Cable and X-Force. That's this series right here. Cable and X-Force, which this series I have not finished reading. I have the whole set in physical copies just like this. I did not finish reading it. It has a really bad rap. Like, people say it's a pretty terrible storyline. It has to do with like basically Cable's arm. He has a cybernetic arm and he loses it or like gets it back, or I don't know, something weird happens to his arm. You can kind of tell like that's his arm right there holding the gun, and he has this weird like, you know, PTSD from his arm or something. And then it's got Hope, another one of my favorite characters, Hope Summers, which is Cable's daughter, which would make her Cyclops' granddaughter, is in this story. So there's a lot of family drama, and honestly with X-Men, I think that's what makes X-Men X-Men or X-Force, all the different X titles, what makes them so great is all the family drama and all the different, like, there's like love triangles, and you have like so many characters, like their kids become part of the team and whatnot. So that's like something I like about the X-Men storyline. So the fact that there's this book, and there's a lot of other ones where it's Cable and his daughter Hope are like the main, they have the spotlight. I just personally enjoy it. So like I said, haven't finished reading it, but that's a little bit of background on that one, Cable and X-Force. And then they Marvel relaunched Uncanny X-Force. So these two are two different stories, but they were happening at the same time when they came out for whatever reason. Again, I think it's kind of weird to have two X-Force books and splitting up the team and whatnot. So this is the other Uncanny X-Force book by Sam Humphries and Ron Garney. And this one was centered around an all-female team of mutants with, I think, like a couple of guys. Obviously, Bishop's right there. I don't know who that bald guy is next to Storm, but there's a female version of Phantom X, Storm, Psylocke, and then Spiral, another dope character, really sick action figure of her that they recently put out. She's a six-armed, like, cyber assassin or something. But really, really cool idea, I think, to put this group of characters together. Again, I feel like they kept the theme of this kind of cyberpunk look. I mean, this looks like an anime series to me. Like, all the swords, you got a bunch of girls, you got this, guy in the background, mean mugging with a sick profile with a tattoo on his eye. This is something I've never read, by the way. I've never read this story. I feel like when it came out, there was a little bit of controversy because I think it was like not necessarily because it was an all-female team, but more so because they changed Phantom X to a female character, which I don't know, like, if it's the same character or if it's a completely different person just who dresses like Phantom X and happens to be a girl. I have no clue. I've never read it. I might read it one day, but again, my thing was, like, I thought it was weird that they made two different X-Force books. I think they should have called it like a different team name or something, right? Like they have X-Men Red, X-Men Blue. I don't know, make a different color or make it X. There's like a million X teams out there, right? So that's just my opinion. It might be an awesome book. I've never heard anyone read it before. I do think this is a cool cover. And the last thing I wanted to show you guys from this series right here, so this is issue 1. I actually have a variant edition of this one that I picked up at a steal of a deal, and that's going to be, this is a original art. This is a sketch and colored cover by the artist Beth Sotelo. So this is a one-of-a-kind comic book cover. It's double signed by the person who did that Psylocke drawing and by the writer of the comic book. So this is a one-of-one, completely original art. The artist drew on this cover. For those of you that don't know, Marvel, DC, all the other comic book companies, every now and then they'll put out a comic book. So for example, this comic book right here is the same as this one. When you went to the store and bought this, the cover was completely white. It was blank. It had the logo, so it had this X-Force logo, but the rest was blank. And comic book companies will do that so that you yourself, if you're an artist, you can draw your own picture on it, make it one of a kind, or you can pay an artist or find another artist that you like and have them put like anything you want on it, right? It could be your favorite character. It could be a character from that comic book. It could be anything, really. I actually was at a comic book store recently, and they had a Star Wars cover just like this, where it was blank, and the artist drew a picture of Nicolas Cage on it. And I thought it was like I thought it was wild. And I asked the comic book store owner, I go, hey, what comic book is that? Like, tell me what this is. And he goes, oh, it's crazy. It's a blank cover, obviously. And he told an artist, he's like, hey, just draw whatever you want on it. And that artist, for whatever reason, wanted to draw Nicolas Cage on it. So there you go. A little bit of history on blank covers. So if you ever are shopping or see somebody selling a cover that's just all white and doesn't have a picture, that's the purpose of it, for you to draw something on it, or for you to find your favorite artist or a friend or whoever to draw a custom drawing, and then it turns into a one-of-one, completely original cover. This casing, if you notice, I have this kind of like in a frame, in a hard plastic frame, with this yellow label across the top where it says 9.6. This is what's called a certified graded cover, right? So there's companies out there that will grade your comic book. They'll basically give it a number out of 10, a rating, and then they'll encapsulate it, put it in this nice hard frame, and you can hang it up on your wall. I think they look really nice. Yellow at the top just means that it's signed by someone. So this is signed by the artist and by the writer. If it has a blue label at the top, it's not signed, but they'll still grade it and certify, the grading and that it's an authentic comic book. So it's a little bit more knowledge for you guys, something that I think is really nice. On my Whatnot page, I'm primarily going to be showcasing signed and framed comic books just like this one. This one is going to be for sale on my Whatnot page. So if you don't already have Whatnot, download Whatnot app. It's free. And then find me on there. It's just Cyclops_shop. And I'm going to be doing some live streaming pretty much every weekday in the afternoons and evenings. So with that, I appreciate you guys. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope you learned something. Comic books are supposed to be fun, so I hope you have fun collecting, buying, selling, learning more. Until next time, guys, follow me on Whatnot and follow me on IG. Thanks a lot. Take care.